All right, guys, let's find out how to mop. I know it sounds simple, but there are some steps really that you want to use, okay? Um, so first thing would be to prepare the area, right? You want to remove any rugs or chairs or other obstacles that might be getting in your way. All right, vacuum thoroughly. You don't want to just spread mud right into those into the grout on the tile or any sort of cracks that might be there, right? So be sure vacuum that first. Vacuum it really, really good. Okay. Um, Not only that, it's going to get rid of debris, and you don't want to, look like you're pushing around a bunch of garbage. Okay. And I really don't like vacuuming because it's going to kick everything up, push it into the grout. So vacuum. Never ever mop before sweeping. These are some pro tips. Because dust and crumbs, they're going to create streaks, right? And so you don't want to have to keep going over things over and over. Before wetting a floor, if it's a dry, dusty floor, get it, use the mop dry before you use it wet. Get that dry, stuff off of there and then use it, or else you're just pushing mud all over the place, okay? You're gonna need to prepare the mop solution, right? It kind of depends on the floor type, but mostly that depends on technique, right? The best overall safest one that we use is Pine Sol, okay? There are some people that are very, very set on what they put on their laminate wood or their hardwood flooring. And so if they ask us to use something else, I would explain, that we're absolutely happy to. But the way that we do apply the Pine Sol and apply the actual, the mopping water on there is actually very, damp and not wet, right? And so it dries super fast and it's able to clean it really well, okay? And that today's laminates and hardwoods are definitely able to handle Pine Sol, okay? Fill the mop bucket with warm water if you can. Hotter the better. Remember tact, okay? Temperature, that's our very first thing. So fill the bucket with warm water if you have access to it. And the cleaning solution, I think it's, a half a cup per gallon. Make sure and look at the bottle, okay? Because sometimes they dilute it stronger than others. I think one right now is like, twice as much with half the, so read it when you dilute it, okay? Be sure to wring out any extra water, right? We don't want to slap a big old wet sponge on there, right? We want to make sure it's out of there. So I want you guys to start bringing the mop bucket so that you can thoroughly wring that out, okay? I know it takes a little bit of space in the car, but we're using the company vehicle, so it'll be in there, okay? Pro tip, be sure to, not use too much water, right? On wood floors, laminate floors, laminate's still made of wood, it's just a thin layer, right? So those things can really puff up too. So you don't want water sitting on any areas for a long time or else we're replacing the floor, okay? So not a wet mat, a damp mop, almost always, okay? You want to mop in sections, right? You've heard the term painting yourself into a corner. You don't want to do that, right? Because you don't want to be walking over where you've already cleaned. Not only is it not safe, but you're going to leave footprints, right? You just clean there. Why would you walk there? So look at it in small, sections and use the figure 8 pattern that we were using, wiping everything down, right? You're doing that on the floor with the mop, okay? It's going to turn out more of an S pattern just because of the way the mop is designed, but that's just fine, okay? You want to, the idea is that you cover the floor evenly. So let's say you have a 8-foot by 8-foot section that you're working on, you mop that 8-foot by 8-foot section, then you move on to the next, okay? And then you move backwards. Remember, everything goes backwards, okay? So we want to do this side, move back. And again, that's how you avoid painting yourself into a corner, right? So, some pro tips, overlap some strokes, right? You're going to avoid missed spots. You're not going to have to re-clean it or touch anything up, okay? Another thing, check that mop head often because when it's dirty, you need to rinse it off, okay? That's really important. That dirt is what's going to leave streaks and it's going to say, ew, we just smeared the dirt all over your floor, right? You're gonna, between each job, you're gonna be replacing the water, okay? That's really important. But even on the same job, right? If it starts looking, cloudy or dark, like brown or, just really too dark, then you're gonna have to use your best judgment. Then it's time to change it. I don't care if it's at one job or two jobs, right? We're not worried about how much Pine Sol we use. We're worried about actually making it clean. If it looks cloudy, go ahead and refill it. Okay. So if you decide you want to do, which sometimes you might, especially in empty houses when you're going to turn them over, once you're done with mopping it with the Pine Sol, right, go ahead and empty out that Pine Sol water, put fresh water in there, and then just follow back up with it. Do the same process. Now, most of the time that's not necessary, but it really depends on how you dilute that Pine Sol. I don't know if you've ever walked on a sticky floor. A lot of the time it's because they use too much Pine Sol, right? And so basically you're walking all over wet, sticky stuff, okay? Let the floors dry completely. We have wet floor signs, okay? But part of it too is actually the drying process, all right? We're not just being lazy by not mopping, with a dry mop afterwards. You need to give the Pine Sol some time to actually kill and disinfect, okay? So there's an actual process to mopping a floor that makes a lot of sense, right? So, air circulation is going to help speed up that process. So if you have a fan with you for ventilating another room, go ahead and put it down. It's going to dry in a flash, right? So some pro tips, right? Never put the rug or on top of furniture, right? So let's say you are cleaning the floor and you get the rug up because you cleared everything like in the first step. Don't put it on their couch. Put it somewhere that isn't going to really have any sort of impact. If you need to put them out front or something like that, because you could shake those off. Do it somewhere you can't see all the dust that falls off. Then put them out front. Wait till it's dry. Put them back. Okay. So dry mopping can help. I talked about that a second ago, but it's kind of help with leftover streaks. So if it's drying and you're starting to see some streaks, then just go ahead and grab out the dry mop and follow it up. All right. So as far as cleaning and storing the mop equipment, right? You want to, when you're done with the day, try and put back the mop head as clean as possible, right? The first step when you start any job, I want you to rinse that mop head. It's going to be dry, right? And so getting it wet is really the first step, right? So, in the evening, if you put your mop head away, as long as it doesn't have a bunch of crud on it, it's okay if you forgot to rinse it, okay? All it's going to sit there is disinfect overnight until you bring it to the next place. If you happen to be using one of the reusable mop heads that we have, then just tell us when they start getting worn. We'll replace them. Okay. At operations, we have hangers for the mops. Hang them upside down, right? Don't leave it in the bucket. All right, that's just gross. But you'll see the other mops are hanging upside down there. Okay. And then do your best to try and empty the water completely and dry the mop bucket before you put it back in the car and you leave. Okay. That's how you mop a floor. Pretty easy, right? No, there's a little science to it. So thank you. Good job.